Okay, we are now recording. Welcome to week 4, Teacher as Change Agent. Everyone can hear me loud and clear? Excellent.
Yeah,
beautiful. Thank you very much. All right, so Teacher as Change Agent is about your sense of purpose. So your drive to improve and to change your practice as necessary. So the difference, I guess, that you want to make in your teaching. So it's also about identifying the tools and the attitude needed to prepare you in engaging in important and productive change. So this could be individually, or it could be with colleagues and possibly even with parents as well, depending on the particular situation. So to participate actively in this session and to make the most out of the learning opportunities around Teacher as Change Agent, there were 3 preparation tasks that you needed to do. So these 3 tasks, they provide you with knowledge about the different characteristics of resilience, of change agent, and also the importance of personal learning. So the first task is you had to draw up and through interacting with the other tasks, fill out your teacher.
We can't hear you.
You can't hear me?
That was better.
That's better. Goodness me, it's very sensitive now, but thank you, Belinda. Is that better?
Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I'm having a few technical issues. Can you please make sure you either put a message you put a message there. Excellent. All right, so I'm just going to try and stick really close to the microphone. Is that better now, Belinda? Yeah, okay. Hopefully I'm not going to cut in and out. All right, so the 3 learning tasks. The first one was your T chart. The second one was completing your first Bright online module. So this was B. And the third was our reading for the week. So that was characteristics of teachers as change agents. And I've included that at the bottom with the APA reference so that you can see exactly what that looks like. And if you do choose to use this in your assessment task, that would be how you would reference it on your 3rd slide, your reference slide. Any questions about that? Okay. So to start with, could everyone please pull out their T chart? So the one with resilient and change agent. If we could all have that out, please. Thank you. If for some reason you didn't get to completing your T chart, can you please grab a piece of paper and draw one up now? So write resilient on one side and change agent on the other. So in the resilient column, you were asked to list 10 to 15 characteristics that you would attribute to a resilient teacher. So you would have developed this understanding via the completion of that first Bright module. So Jen gave 2 examples. She said being able to bounce back, which is vital, and the ability to adapt well. So what else did we have? Who was going to share?
Yeah, I'm happy to share. Effective at time management and organisation.
Very important, yeah. Anything else?
Oh, yeah, several more. I just didn't know how many.
No, keep going, Paris. Keep
adaptable.
Going.
They are effective at problem solving. Realistic expectations of themselves. I think that was quite a big one because we generally do put very high expectations on ourselves. Sense of humor. That was a funny one. Sorry. That was a interesting one. Yeah, I didn't really think of that.
Didn't you? I think
Oh,
the
like,
sense of humor is really
yeah, I
important.
did. Yeah,
Yeah.
I guess I don't have a massive sense of humor. So, yeah, I wish I did, but I'm working on it.
I guess that also includes sense of humor. For me, it's making learning fun, having a positive attitude. So just being able to laugh at yourself as well. In some cases, to be a bit silly, it really does make all the difference. So to put students at ease as well. What does anyone else think that that was an unusual one?
No, I've met some pretty funny teachers,
Excellent. That's good to
even
hear.
if they laugh at their own jokes.
Okay, yeah, that's important. No,
I put down personal well-being, so having support at home and support with their colleagues, I think is quite important.
very important. So having those connections with
Connection.
colleagues, yeah, the
Yeah.
connections with colleagues, so that you're able to make those networks and to
Mm.
have people there to support you, and I guess for you to support other people as well. Anything else that anyone had to add to the list?
I had having having a good work-life balance. So having some sort of outlet through sport or some sort of activity that you enjoy. Positive reinforcement through yourself. Reminding that something like a small incident that might happen one day is nothing to worry about, and just remember that like tomorrow is a new day.
Oh, that's a great one. So not blowing things out of proportion. Yeah. So that, and I guess we could also consider the importance of seeing things as challenges rather than problems. Excellent. Some really good ones. Well done. So you've obviously really connected with that Bright module. So you've got R, I, T, and E left to go. So you're going to do those over the next 4 years throughout your units. So yeah, something to look forward to. But I guess one of the things for me as well is accepting that change is part of living, but really making sure that you're goal orientated as well. So if you do have any challenges, to little steps. So setting achievable goals and making sure that you look to do further study or learning to support, or even reading as well, research to support those goals, to achieve your aims and to assist you with those particular challenges. Excellent. Some very good points there. So if you didn't have a T-chart to start with, hopefully you will have one now, and you will have lots of points that you've jotted down in the resilient column. So in this learning forum, we are going to apply your knowledge that you've gained from completing the 3 tasks to 3 different teaching and learning examples. So the first one was around the introduction and the implementation, and I guess the impact as well, of an arts-based inquiry program. And this was in a prep classroom, so early primary. So the cycle of inquiry that you saw in this particular clip, the inquiry cycle, it's a process that involves encouraging students, encouraging children to ask and answer questions based on investigation and research, so to develop new ideas and understandings. So for those of you that watched the clip, I guess it would have, the language that you used to jot down those characteristics and your understandings, they would have been made easier through the reading of the reading that was suggested this week. So I did a pretty deep reading, of the journal article to gain an understanding of specific characteristics, and the authors outlined 4 general characteristics. Can anyone remember what they were? Did anyone note down what those 4 main characteristics were?
One was characterised as lifelong learners.
Yes, very important, Jake. Yep. Anything else that we pulled out of that?
The other one was mastery with comprehensive teaching knowledge.
Yes. The next one?
Human resource management.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the last one was collaboration with others, which appears essential for all teachers.
Yeah. So, and also there was the entrepreneurship as well. I always have trouble. I can never get my tongue around that. Entrepreneurship. That was really important in terms of being an agent of change, of being a change agent. Yeah, so how did we go with the reading? For some of you, I don't know, it might be the first time that you've had to read a journal article like this. For some of our internal students, come straight from high school, they may not have had a lot of opportunity to read something like this. Believe it or not, this was actually quite a short journal article. And like the reading, you would have been able to, I actually chunked it again, as I discussed last week. So I read small parts at a time. I focused first on the introduction, and I really pulled apart all of the key words as we discussed last week. With a journal article, they always have, you know, the same headings: abstract, introduction, methodology, data collection, data analysis, and a conclusion or a discussion, and then a conclusion. So because they do have those reliable headings, it's really easy to be able to, if you do want to just find out about participants, or you just want to look at it briefly, you might want to concentrate on the abstract, the methodology, and then the conclusions. So you don't always have to read the entire article, but I think in this case, if you really did want to get a good understanding of all those characteristics, a deeper reading of it was necessary. So the characteristics of teachers as change agents that were evident in this learning cycle. Would anyone like to start by sharing? It would have been, again, made easier by reading the article and pulling out some of those points. Who would like to share first?
Being curious about life, people, new insights to education.
Yep, yeah, very much so, yeah. Anything else?
I got heaps more, but I didn't want to take it all. Being reflective.
Yes, reflective.
Having guidance, being accessible, being positive, being committed, being trustful, being self-assured, being innovative, feeling responsive, collaboration, and eager to learn.
All good ones, excellent. Really important that we collaborate with others, and that was really clear there. The teacher, I think, was already a very experienced teacher, but I thought it was fantastic that she wanted to evaluate her practices and actually get someone that she referred to as an expert in to assist, to extend her understandings and possibly to give new insights. So I guess this is where the innovation comes in. Really reflected deeply on what was happening with the students, and really creating those effective and powerful collaborations with colleagues, with parents and the community, but most significantly, I think with the students, they were really part of their learning. Would you agree? Yeah. So anything else? Taryn has been very thorough, but was there anything else that you got out of that in terms of teacher as a change agent?
I think the one I got was like I wrote down, you need to see yourself as a change agent, activators and evaluators in order to make a difference in students' learning. And then the next point I've got is it's a mindset, it's a belief, a way of thinking. So it's a big change.
That was a big change, wasn't it? And it was a change in their classroom practices, which they would have used, you know, in all areas of the curriculum, I think. And I really do think that it was very empowering as well, wasn't it? For the teachers and for the students as well. It really, you know, was very special to see that inquiry being used and for the students themselves to be change agents in their learning environment. So would you actually consider those teachers as being change agents? Yes? No? Yeah. How were they change agents?
Yeah. I
Having a bit of trouble with your microphone.
I'm just trying to get my head around the point that a change agent, like, are we describing a change agent? Because then Sue, you would, hey now, Angela?
I'm sorry,
Yes?
I'm having a lot of trouble hearing you. You're kind of going wobbly. Who was that speaking? Was that Paris?
Yeah.
Yeah. Your microphone. I think we're having a bit of issue with your microphone. So we were looking specifically at those characteristics. So we were talking about things like being a lifelong learner, being an innovator, and really looking at evaluating your practices and seeing what you might need to change or make better in the environment. So it's not just how you want to change, it's how you might want to make things better, to learn more, so to make your practices better. So through evaluation and then possibly getting an expert in, as these teachers did, or it could just be through going and doing some professional development and learning further. So I guess it was clear that they were change agents because, as the teacher pointed out, there was increased student vocabulary development, their sense of self and their confidence was elevated, and their love of learning, their excitement, their interest in learning. And the students really were empowered themselves by being change agents and having an impact on their environment. And so the teachers were excited and they were elevated by the children's learning and also by their enthusiasm. So yeah, it was a win-win for everyone. It was a very powerful change, I think, for everyone concerned. But I guess if we were to ask those teachers involved if they were change agents, what do you think they might say? Any thoughts? Who would like to share? Do you think those teachers would consider themselves as change agents?
I don't think most of the time teachers see themselves like that.
No, I agree, Kylie. Yeah. I think maybe they thought of themselves as just doing their job.
Yeah,
Yep.
pretty much.
Yeah, which is, I guess, what a lot of teachers do. But really, they had a huge impact on those students. And not just then, in that moment, but, you know, as those students, that was actually in 2012. So these gorgeous young people are actually secondary students now. So what kind of skills do you think they developed from those teachers using those strategies? What kind of skills would they be using now as secondary students? Any thoughts?
I think one of the things that I wrote down that kind of seems relevant to change agent is that it's really funny, but that someone wrote, it was ordinary magic. And I think that when teachers are change agents, they really help students to find that ordinary magic in their everyday thinking. Does that make any sense?
It does, Kylie. Yeah, that
Sorry.
makes a lot of sense. No, I understand. I like that. Everyday magic. That's fantastic. You know, because really those students moving into secondary and into upper primary and secondary, they're going to be much more critical thinkers. They're going to be problem solvers, investigators, researchers, and I guess entrepreneurs as well. So change agents again in their own right. So yeah, it is a very exciting thing to be a change agent. So thank you to everyone who watched the clip and have shared. So Paris has made a comment here. Change agent can be the teacher themselves due to having change agent characteristics. Then you can have a change in the environment, and this is also considered a change agent. Yes, that is correct. Very much so. Yeah, a good point. So a change in the environment. So it's not just about, you know, and we're going to actually have a look at it, an example of that very soon. So that's a very good point. Thank you, Paris. And thank you for using the chat too. All right, so this next particular one, this learning experience 2, this was about I wish my teacher knew. So I asked you to use the graphic organizer to think about the different change agent and resilient characteristics again that would be needed at the different stages of this particular incident. So there were 4 things that you needed to consider and enter into your graphic organizer. And I suggested that you might refer to your teacher again and your prior knowledge from the tasks. So you needed to look at pre-implementation, during implementation, post-implementation, and follow-up. So what characteristics of change agent might be needed to enact that learning experience, and what kinds of resilience might be needed as well. So it was a pretty, I guess, inspirational, a very inspirational experience. What did we think? What characteristics of change agent might we need in that pre-implementation stage? Who would like to go first?
Ange, I had being a positive role model and giving guidance.
Yes, very much so. Yeah, that's a good one, Lauren. We also need to make sure, I guess, to get to that point, to get to that understanding of needing to know the students better, needing to know the reasons behind their behaviour possibly, which I thought might have been a goal for that teacher. We didn't really know a lot about the information behind the project or why it was implemented. So I guess that's one of the reasons why we want you to break down those 4 areas. But yeah, you need to be a really good critical thinker and reflector to understand that, you know, you really did need to know the reasons behind the behaviour. And I guess you would need to be committed to reform and to those understandings to drive a change like that. you know, to be open to new ways and approaches. Because I guess her aim was really to give those children a voice, wasn't it? What about the characteristics of resilience that might be needed at that pre-implementation stage? Any thoughts, Lauren?
They need
Be
to
a
be
good,
Sorry, Kylie? Oh. Anyone? Lauren or Kylie?
good communication.
Yes, good communication. And not just good communication, but extending that by being to good active listening as well. So not just listening to students, but hearing them. And especially in that pre-implementation and during implementation as well. A good one, Lauren. Anything else?
I said that you have to be realistic of the outcomes and like obviously what's going to happen because it might not go the way you want it to.
Very much so. Yeah, being realistic of what those outcomes could be, because I guess depending on the age of the students as well, that's a really important factor in terms of what the outcome might be. So I guess seeing, as I said before, seeing issues or concerns as challenges rather than problems. But I guess we don't really just have to see it in terms of negativity with that particular activity as well, because the pre-implementation stage, it may be about wanting to know further about the students' interests as well. I wish my teacher knew that I was interested in something, or that I wish my teacher knew that I didn't know how to read, or that I was struggling with maths. So it's not just emotional things, it's like their interests, their strengths and their needs as well. Anything else that you would like to add in terms of during implementation?
During maybe being mentally strong in case you do get those negative comments.
Definitely. I think in this particular case, especially in one of those low socioeconomic areas, there might be some really concerning things, and you would need to have resilience in terms of asking for help and seeking guidance and assistance for yourself and the students as well. So again, that comes back down to networking. Yeah, a good point, Lauren. So thinking critically, be willing to take calculated risks, because it's definitely something that would have been involved in this particular activity. And that interacting with parents as well might come into play here.
Right.
Supporting
students.
students.
Get my glasses off my dresser, please.
Kylie, I think you need to mute your mic. Believe me, you're not the only one. Everyone does that. Always. So what about that post-implementation or follow-up sort of stage? What do you think might be some important characteristics of a change agent? Can we think of any?
I would say massive one is able to manage emotions, especially after you've implemented and following up. I know we said it in the pre-implementing stage, but I think it's more, dominant.
Agree completely. Yeah, so again, those characteristics that you would need for that, like we talked about it before, being able to adapt as well, like emotionally, but also physically, like changing and differentiating for each of those individual students, depending on what they came up with. And I guess emotionally as well, Paris, keeping things in perspective in those sort of situations. And again, asking for guidance and help as necessary, that would be vital. Yeah. And I think, I can't remember, one of you referred to Hattie's comment in the article about being activators and evaluators. So in that follow-up, really making sure that you concentrate on that evaluation process. What could be done better in the implementation and post-implementation as well. So what would you need to do in terms of resilience in that follow-up stage, that evaluation stage? Any thoughts? Again, I think characteristics like adapting well and critical reflection and again, communication skills and especially in terms of if you wanted to seek feedback, being open to change. Anything else?
What about a balance between life and work? That came up quite a bit. I don't know, I guess, where that would fit in, but it would contribute to it.
Definitely Paris, because you know, the teacher was obviously someone that was extremely dedicated, and to implement something like this would have taken a huge amount of effort, and not just physical effort but emotional as well. So you would definitely need to look after yourself in terms of that. Excellent. Some really good points there. Sorry, Paris, go on.
No, that was me. Oh, unless Paris was talking. I was just going to say, I found that the teachers' belief in the students sort of has quite a positive outcome. I think that would have been in that the pre-implementation stage, where you're seeing your students as being capable and competent, and can just seeing that they can do it. And then if they can't, then you aim high, and sort of work it out so you can get everybody on the same level by the end.
Yeah, and that was something like, again, that came out in the prep one as well. They had such high expectations for the students in terms of their use of scientific vocabulary and things like that. The teacher commented that she didn't think that they would be able to think so critically, but they were able to. And the same goes for this one in that pre-implementation, as you said, Paul, and making sure that your expectations for students are high. And, that would, you need to think about what is age appropriate as well for that across those different levels, early childhood, primary and secondary. Excellent. All right. So, I guess based on your knowledge about teachers as professionals, what might be some of the issues and I guess opportunities that might present themselves when being a change agent and implementing this kind of experience? So in terms of teacher as professionals, some of those things that we talked about last week, what might be important in this particular activity? Any thoughts?
Ange, maybe constantly renewing yourself as a professional.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So that lifelong learning, is that what you're talking about, Laura?
Yeah.
Definitely. That's important. So that opportunity to evaluate your practice against the professional standards, and then continuing to grow as a teacher through research and also further study and reading as well. What about things like mandatory reporting in this particular incident? Because that's the first thing that I thought of when I was watching this. Some of those things that the students were sharing, you really might need to think in terms of being a professional and that code of conduct with students sharing sensitive information. It's a bit of a, I guess in some ways, in terms of a change agent, it's a bit of a risk as well. I think in terms of what might come out of that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I thought that there'd probably be a bit of a responsibility that sort of falls on the teacher too. If, you know, if one of the children says, oh, you know, something negative, you know, about their, you know, about something that's going on in their life or, you know, family home or anything like that, the teacher might have a sense of, you know, responsibility to, you know, is not sure what to do in that sort of situation.
Well, it would be a sense of responsibility, definitely, Jake, but it's also a legal responsibility as well in terms of reporting those situations. So again, as I said, there is a certain amount of risk in teacher as change agent in that particular situation, but I guess the important factor for her was to really develop a good understanding of her students and looking at their context in terms of how she would have been teaching them and all of the different considerations. So yeah, we need to make sure that we think about those professional aspects as well. All right, so the previous two examples are of teachers and the impact that they have on their students. This activity, and this is kind of what Paris was talking about, I guess, this activity is thinking about like teachers themselves as change agents. And Kylie made the comment in the chat about teacher as the environment as the third teacher. And we're going to be talking a little bit now about environment and resources. So one way of teacher that might be a change agent is by evaluating, then adapting or changing your practice. And so you can do this during your placement, and this is basically what your placement is about as well. So what I'm going to do is talk you through an activity, and I want you to pay special attention to the approaches used and the teacher considerations. So what I did in the internal lesson is I actually pretended that the class were year 11 students, were year 7 students, and I got them to do the activity. So I want you to imagine that you're a pre-service teacher on a placement and you have been asked to teach cell structures in a science class. So from your observations of your students in your first week, you've identified a few things. One of them, that a number of your students developmentally still like hands-on activities. And so, you know, some of them were very kinesthetic in their learning. So they like tactile experiences. And you also observed, which is probably not uncommon, that a particular group of students were heavily into Minecraft. So you chose to combine both curriculum content, so teaching them about cell structures, with your pedagogical response, so differentiating for individual learners' interests and needs and strengths, and your teaching strategy, so the use of hands-on manipulative materials and activities with reference to a real world interest that your students could actually relate to. So in the internal class today, I provided students with all of these materials, and I asked them to, they were in table groups, so I asked them to divide their table group in half, because we only had limited resources. I only had 6 Minecraft chests with these particular crafting tools or crafting materials. One half of the table, we're going to create an animal cell, and the other half a plant cell. And I gave them 5 minutes on a timer to actually manipulate the materials and to make something. So I also asked them when they'd completed the activity that they put the materials back into the chest in a way that they found them so that the next group could have the same experience. I used an online countdown on the electronic whiteboard, and as I walked around the room, I was checking for understanding, for prior knowledge. Some students actually had, you know, quite a good knowledge about cells, so we talked about how we might extend that. I had a group that had a little bit of difficulty sharing resources, so I had to deal with that as well. So I used strategies to keep the students on task and to, you know, encourage that cooperative learning. So what I guess I want you to think about, what do you think some of my constraints might have been with an activity like that? Because you're not actually experiencing it as we did in the internal class, it might be a bit difficult to think about, but can you think of any constraints that I might have had in implementing that activity?
Was one of them time? Sorry, time.
Time definitely was a big one.
Probably enough resources, like enough materials to use for the activity.
Yeah, that was a big one because I really would have liked to have them in pairs, but because I didn't have enough resources, I wasn't able to do it. And, you know, as a teacher, that's definitely going to be a limitation for you. You know, as we saw in the prep clip, all of the wonderful electronic whiteboards and all of the wonderful materials that those teachers had to use. They had cameras and they had iPads and all sorts of things to use. That isn't necessarily going to be the case in every school. So we need to work with the resources that we have. So resources, you're right, Jake, can be a big constraint. Can you think of anything that I might have been able to improve in the
collaboration with the students?
Collaborate. So you mean the way they collaborated with each other?
Yeah.
Yeah. Any suggestions?
Setting clear instructions. So not so free play, instead of kind of giving them a bit of guidance and steps to do, instead of just free play. There's studies that show more intentional teaching will eliminate behaviours opposed to free play.
Excellent. So in the task, they had to, when they each had to construct a plant cell or an animal cell. And so then I got the two groups within the one group to talk about the differences and the similarities between those things. So I guess there was an element of teacher initiated, but it's a really good point, Taryn. We really need to make sure that all of our intentions, our practices and approaches are very purposeful, and that we use open-ended language and questions to encourage students' inquiry, their research, their observations, and how they might extend their understanding. So an excellent point, Taryn, very good. You know, you could have also done something like bring language into it. You might have got the students to label the particular cells as well. So incorporating different areas of the curriculum. Okay, so some other teacher think. What other ways might you use Minecraft chests in the classroom? Has anyone experienced the use
mathematical concepts?
Yeah, definitely mathematical concepts. Anything else?
Construction as well. I'm early, so I go to the lowest of the low. So I go construction. Children can put construction together with anything. But yeah, I'd pick construction, mathematical skills, depending on what they are, patterns.
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, in terms of Minecraft, using those chests and manipulating objects, you can do that across all curriculum areas. What about the benefits of manipulating materials in learning? Any specific benefits that you might see of using the sorts of things that you can see on the slide?
Fine motor skills in like the elastics and other things. Also with the literacy there, writing skills, pincer grips and stuff like that is within the writing.
Excellent, very good. And I think we need to remember as well that for many students, visual and auditory cues alone often aren't enough to help them retain knowledge and understanding. So I guess students who are more tactile or kinesthetic in their learning, they may need manipulatives for that multisensory learning. So, you know, to help with things like placing abstract ideas into, I guess, a more concrete reality. So that's really important. Like we can see down here with this particular one example. I remember as a child, my father spending hours cutting up oranges and trying to explain halves and quarters and thirds, you know, to really try and help me develop those understandings, because I'm a very visual, tactile learner. They're the sorts of things that I...
Yeah, manipulating materials is very visual. My son was having issues with division, and I got him to get his Lego out, and we literally got the amount that we needed and we divided it by 4. He was not understanding where the remainder came from. So once we did it, you know, there was a remainder of 2. I said, look, you got 2 left over, that's your remainder. So he was manipulating, and his visual helped him get through that, and he could understand where this R2 was coming from.
Yeah, an excellent example, Taryn. So that's really making those abstract ideas more concrete. And I like the use of the Lego too. So it's something that they're interested in, I guess, like the Minecraft example. Yeah, so, and it's also those sort of manipulative things are more fun. So students can acquire knowledge through active and fun processes that really engage them, those hands-on processes. And in this case, as well, as Taryn pointed out, that working collaboratively is also important to encourage students to share ideas and perspectives. Yeah, so, and also I guess these kind of hands-on manipulative activities allow students to take ownership of their learning experiences as well. Any other thoughts? Do we have many people here that do recognise that in themselves that they're tactile learners, that they're kinesthetic, that they need to manipulate materials?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, it's very common. Even in terms of in the past, I think you would see students doodling while they're listening or fiddling, and often, you know, slap on the wrist, concentrate. But now teachers are actually providing students with materials to manipulate while they're thinking, and encouraging them to draw and to, you know, as we're talking about with the graphic organisers, to organise your thoughts on paper as well as you're listening, so that it's about recognising all of those different things. So as a pre-service teacher who wants to improve and change their practice, what characteristics of resilience would you need to draw upon to enact this particular learning experience? Again, go back to your T chart. Give me some examples.
Collaboration with other educators, other teachers on what they're doing, and having that prior knowledge of where it's going to go. So if it goes in a different direction, having the knowledge of where it's going to kind of go as well.
Yeah, a really good example. Thanks, Taryn. Anything else? Anyone?
Probably being confident, you know, in learning something new, and I would say also committed as well to to obviously trusting, you know, learning something different as well.
Yeah. And as you said before, in relation to your reading of the journal article, Jake, mastery of skills. So you really do need to have a good understanding, a solid basis of understanding before you can change. A good example. Anything else?
Also persistence. Persistence.
Yeah, a good one, Paris. Persistence, I think, in constantly evaluating our skills, really thinking critically about the reasons behind why we're doing things and differentiating for those individual students. So some really good examples there. Okay, so drawing upon the standards, what professional learning would a pre-service teacher need before enacting this learning experience? Let's have a look at the standards. It's a little bit fuzzy. Can we think of what particular things can you pull out from the standards?
3.1, establish challenging learning goals.
Beautiful, yep. What else?
2.2.
Yep. Content selection and organisation. What about over here? Definitely understanding how students learn.
1.2, yeah.
Yeah. Physical and social and intellectual development and characteristics of students. So really knowing the students and understanding their interests. So that's what, you know, that particular activity was all about, using students' interests and understanding how they learn.
3.4, select and use resources.
Beautiful, yeah.
And 3.6, evaluate and improve on programs.
Oh, trigger happy, sorry about that. 3.6, evaluate and improve teaching programs, yeah. And I guess also in terms of if you are going to use those sort of Minecraft or gamification sort of things, especially if you're using it in terms of an online platform, which a lot of classrooms do these days, this is a really important one. Use ICT safely, responsibly, and ethically. So again, going back into professionalism as well. And managing challenging behaviour. I did have a little bit of that in my class today with my faux Year 7 students, with some of them having difficulty sharing materials. So I really had to think about that as well. So creating and maintaining supportive and safe learning environments.
5.2, 5.4, both about their feedback on their learning and assessing, interpreting students' data.
Beautiful, yeah. So I guess what kind of, we talked about exit tickets the last couple of weeks. What kind of exit ticket or sort of formative assessment do you think could have been done with that particular exercise? Any ideas?
Getting children to verbally tell you the outcomes of their learning.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. You could have even done something like get them to take photos and then do a bit of a learning story about what they've actually learnt. Yeah.
I find, getting children to tell you what they found hard or where they made a mistake. They get a lot of learning from looking what they didn't get right as much as what they did get right.
Excellent. A really good point, Kylie. A very good point. Okay, so I want you to really think about what you've learnt tonight around teacher as change agent. And I want you to think about it in terms of part B of your assessment task. So this is your personal response. So your oral component, which you're going to record over slide 2 of your PowerPoint. So you need to choose one of the 4 representations, and you need to focus on that specifically. And it's a personal reflection about it. Teacher as change agent, does this one float anyone's boat? Is it something that you can see that you would focus on?
I think I'm doing it.
Yeah. Taryn, so Which aspect of teacher of change agent would you like to reshape or change or modify or extend? Any ideas?
I think it has a lot of different characteristics that I want to shape and know more about, etc. I want to have a look at it from moving forward to professional development and teachers as long life learners and not just finishing off after the 4 years. I learn more in my room as an ECT each day than I do in a classroom.
Definitely. Is there a specific area that you would like to change? Is there something that you think you would focus on?
I would like to change learning as where it was meant to be for prep and stuff, which is play-based. That's where I want to go instead of worksheets and stuff like that. I think as a change agent, we should really be looking at, for that age group, is learning through play. They go from one setting, which is learning through play pretty much the whole year, to a setting where there's not a lot of it. And it's hard to ask 4-year-olds to sit there all day.
Definitely. Yeah, there's
Had a Walker learning system.
Say that again, Belinda.
Walker learning system. So it's all based around investigations, and there's different areas set up in the classrooms. So you'll have a writing station, a math area, a science, a tinkering, dramatic play, but the dramatic play is not like fairies, it's sort of more real world professions. And there's also like a really big creative space around, what's it called? Like collage area, and there's art. And so what happens is that there's these focused children, and you start your day with investigations. It's very individual driven. What space would you like to investigate today? And then it's linked back to the curriculum. So in terms of prep, it's a really nice connection between coming from kindy and then going into a prep environment. It's the first thing when you start the day. So again, it's very tactile, it's very hands-on. You're not asking the kids to sit still, be quiet. You know, yes, you do that later on in the day with your explicit teaching, but I thought it was a really creative way and a good link between the two spaces.
Yeah.
Might be something that you could do, Taryn.
That's very much, I guess, teacher as practitioner too, because you're focusing on a specific area, and I guess you would be thinking about how you're going to change that. So that you might be looking at practitioner, I think, as well. That would be good. And then the kind of knowledge and skills and the sort of resilience that you would need personally to change those particular aspects in your understanding and your approaches to teaching. And I really like the way the both of you are focusing very much on your teaching area. So this really is a personal response. So your choice out of the 4, you really need to respond from a personal perspective. So what I've actually done as well is that in terms of that developing resilience as part of changing your practice, how you're actually as a teacher going to change or adapt your particular practices. This comes straight from the seminar for tomorrow, and I've also given you the APA reference. If you do want to use this, that's exactly what it would look like in the 3rd slide for your assessment task. But it's a really excellent overview of 4 important dimensions of resilience that you may want to refer to in your personal response. So making sure that you do think about that social dimension, building support networks and seeking help and advice, the motivational dimension, being confident, as Jake, I think, pointed out. It's a really important one, being persistent, having that focus on improvement or innovation. The professional dimension, so being flexible, adaptable, critically reflecting, always thinking about evaluating and solving problems. But then, very importantly, that emotional dimension, which a lot of teachers fail to think about. It was reflected upon this evening, which I thought was a really important. We all focus on that motivational dimension, the professional dimension, you know, to be inspirational teachers, to make a difference in students' lives. But at what cost for us personally? So really making sure that we care for our own well-being, that we have ways of coping with stress, that we do remain positive and optimistic. Because being a change agent, it can have an impact on you, whether it
Know
be
your limitations.
Yeah, know your limitations. That's important, Taryn. So really making sure that you're able to, you know, look after yourself. Okay, anything that we wanted to add to that at all? No? Going back to the standards. I'll go back to this one. So, any questions or comments in terms of possibly relating this to your assessment task?
Yeah, I just got a quick question. I just want to make sure that the whole, the bit about you having a personal recount on it all. So basically, you're picking something that you personally want to change in your field, and then once you've picked that thing, and you've identified what you need to personally do, you understand whether it is a teacher as professional, teacher as practitioner, whatever way of going about it. Is that correct?
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay, all right. Okay.
Really good point. So I would start backwards.
Yeah.
So thinking about, especially, you know, because you're all across early childhood, primary or secondary, so it's going to be a very individual approach. So I guess, you know, for me personally, I being teacher as learner is really important, because I really believe that I want to learn from my students, and I guess trying to work out how I'm going to do that and how I'm going to make a difference in my personal practice. How, you know, of these dimensions, what do I really need to think about to be, you know, a lifelong learner, and to encourage that in my students, to encourage to develop understandings of my students and how they're going to, you know, be, you know, using inquiry-based approaches, using intentional teaching practices to really understand what lies behind my students, to give them a voice in their own learning. So that's something that's important to me. So, you know, I would really need to be reflective. I would need to be flexible and adaptive in my understandings of individual students and differentiating for their individual interests and needs and strengths. So can you see how that's sort of teacher learner, but it's still very personal.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, all right. That's helpful.
Other points now. In the seminar tomorrow, I'm going to go into depth about this, and especially about teacher as change agent. And we've touched a little bit on this emotional dimension, but this is something I'm going to actually give you an example about that. So if you want to hook in at 8 a.m. in the morning, or possibly preferably watch the recording. So that will give you some more insights. And then once we, you know, you've looked at these characteristics, so teacher is a change agent and the kind of resilience that is needed in that, Jen's going to put up her third assessment task support video. So in terms of responding to those 3 questions as well, a little bit more of an in-depth understanding of that. If you do need some clarification, that will be of great assistance to you. So I guess what she's doing is trying to each week giving you a little bit more information for you to reflect on, and then culminating, I guess, in next week with you really developing an understanding of the graphic organizer / drawing that you want to use and the specific focus that you want to concentrate on. Any questions, comments? Nope. Okay. I am going to turn off the recording now. Thank you to those of you who are listening at home. And if you do have any personal questions, as always, please feel free to email me if you do need clarification or some understandings specifically on your assessment task individually. Okay, good night to everyone at home.
Thanks, Angela.